Hey, hi, hello. Welcome to Diana Emerson. Today we're listening to My Lover, My Killer Consequences of Obsession.
A worried mother desperately searching for her daughter.
Precisely. You don't think you have my help? Yes, my love. My daughter's been missing for 48 hours.
Her children still at home.
I just went downstairs because I was just like, where is everyone? And I can remember him looking at me and saying, I didn't do it. It's worrying me because it's not like her.
This is a mother with three children who doesn't leave any trace whatsoever.
So, what's the specific concern that's caused you to call the police? I said if you're going to dance with the devil, I'm actually going to get burned.
Natalie Henning is the youngest of five.
You know what it's like with the youngest, they can never do any wrong. It's little things that I remember, we weren't allowed to leave the table until our plates were cleared, and she used to get away with all sorts. So yeah, typical baby family stuff.
Later at school, Natalie's popular.
She's always been a social butterfly. Even when she was at school, she was the kid that always had loads of friends.
Age 16, a career decision takes Natalie more than 80 miles away from her hometown of Hemel Hempstead to Portsmouth.
When Natalie left school, she went into the Navy. She was only in for a short time. It really wasn't for her.
In just 3 years, Natalie's life changes dramatically. By 2004, she has married and had a baby, and then separated from her husband.
Obviously, they were very young. We never really understood what had happened between them because they were down in Portsmouth. I was living up in North Yorkshire, so I would only see them intermittently. And Natalie had really serious postnatal depression that just wasn't picked up on. She came home from hospital and she hated him. And he didn't, because they were so young, he just didn't understand what was going on.
Natalie and baby Kirsty moved back in with her mum.
My mum and Natalie always had a very, very, very close relationship.
With the support of her family, Natalie moves into her own home with daughter Kirsty.
I can't remember living with my mum and my dad, but I do remember living with just my mum when I was a lot younger. We just lived in a little flat together. It was quite simple. Like, we had our every day routine. I'd go to school and she'd go to work. It suited us because it was just us two.
Not for long.
While she's living in her Hempstead, she meets a local guy called Paul and they start dating. He came across as, being this perfect guy, had a good job, a nice home, was sort of buttoned up and pulled together. He always had a good job. Quite a lot of money. When we first met him, he had like a brand new Audi TT and obviously my mum thought that was really cool. He had his own house and he had a big job, so he was definitely very independent. I think he was the classic salesman, knew how to sell himself. He came across as being very funny and he came across as being quite likeable. I remember that first time I met him, he brought flowers for my mum and a present for me. I can't remember what it was. I didn't smile at him. I remember because my mum made a joke about it. She was definitely Smith & Wife. Absolutely. Absolutely.
But as the family get to know him, cracks begin to appear.
I can remember sitting in the dining room here and him being incredibly awkward at the fact that there were quite a lot of people in the room and he struggled to make eye contact and that was the first time I think I saw a different side to him. My mum tolerated him. I won't say she hated him because that wouldn't be necessarily true. She tolerated him.
Despite her family's reservations, Natalie continues dating Paul.
All she ever wanted was that sort of perfect family. She just wanted to be in a relationship where she was loved and the children were taken care of. She was definitely happier at first. I think what they call the honeymoon phase. Yeah, she was definitely happy. She was lively. You know, I was spending a lot of time at my nan's when she was still like going out with him.
But the honeymoon phase is short-lived.
Obviously, I didn't know the extent of what was going on, but I knew that they were constantly falling out and bickering and arguing. It would just be over like little things, like just mess, and you know, or if something wasn't done properly, or if she was at work for like a suspicious amount of time.
Paul's jealousy turns to violence.
Within a few months of dating, there's an incident where Natalie receives a text message saying happy birthday from her ex.
Detective Chief Inspector Simon Steele later learns of the attack from a statement made by Natalie. Natalie doesn't inform police until 3 days after the attack.
He grabbed the phone, launched it at her head in a rage. He threw her on the bed and put his right hand around her throat.
She does report to the police, but not immediately. And when asked, you know, why didn't report immediately, Natalie reported that Paul had said, if you tell anyone, I'll kill you. Maybe he had done something like that before. Maybe he hadn't. Maybe he'd never done anything like that before and it was shock. Or maybe it was, you know, the responsibility of she has a child in that environment. It could be that. But reporting to the police when you've been directly threatened is a brave thing to do.
Natalie hides the episode from her family.
Natalie was very, very careful about what she told people. So Kerry would get a snippet of something. My mum would get a snippet of something.
Things are escalating.
The incidents continue after Natalie's reporting Paul to the police. The next day, Paul comes to the house, threatens to kick the door down, and Natalie again rings the police. She reports that. But by the time the police get there, he's already gone. A few days later, he comes and tries to talk to her through the letterbox. So, you know, that intimidation or whatever that was, that continued.
On the 16th of July, police arrest Paul Hemming. He denies the charges and he's released on bail.
It must have been quite frightening because he's made such a direct threat. You know, if you ever tell anyone, I'm going to kill you. And then she did go and tell somebody. And then he's threatening to kick the door down, you know, and he's trying to shout through the letterbox or whatever it is. That's quite intimidating, threatening behaviour from someone who several days prior said that they were going to kill you.
Natalie withdraws her support for a prosecution and agrees to go back with Hemming. But it's not long before police are knocking on Paul's door again.
Just a few weeks later, Paul is arrested and charged with common assault on another woman.
Paul had had other relationships. It was a very similar story. He'd threatened at least one of them to kill them before. He was a very controlling, very clear, manipulative person.
But Natalie does not know any of this, and the promise of a more comfortable life with Hemming is too tempting. She and Kirsty move in with him.
It was a lot better than where me and my mum were originally living. It was, at the time, quite a new house, in a nice estate. You know, just the basic things that we all want, a roof over our heads and to know that we're safe, and that was all she wanted.
From the moment she moves, Natalie's world has changed, but not for the better.
It wasn't long after we moved in with him, almost straight away, he became quite controlling. She got a new job at a hotel nearby, and he'd always pick her up, take her, you know, making sure she was always going where she said she was going. I don't think her happiness shifted at first. I think she was still trying to be positive.
It may not be perfect, but for Natalie, the relationship with Hemming did offer something to her that she wanted. Marriage. And that's what she plans for.
The church was booked, the venue was booked, she had the dress. She'd invited people, she'd spoken to her family. It seems that maybe there were positive elements of this relationship, or maybe she wanted to be with him, or she thought that the future was going to be okay. Maybe he said he was going to change.
One thing that will change are Paul's plans for the wedding day. everyone getting ready for the big day. Everyone except the groom.
He just had got cold feet about getting married. I mean, I'm sure he is not the only person that's ever backtracked on that.
He called the wedding off without actually telling her.
She found out because the venue had phoned her and said, obviously the venue's been cancelled, who do we send this to? And she was like, what do you mean? That was how she found out.
To have it cancelled, it must be embarrassing, humiliating. It makes you wonder why he was doing that. Was the purpose of it humiliation?
She was absolutely devastated. I mean, the wedding dress sat at my mum's for I don't know how long. And before I said to her, Natalie, you just need to get rid of it. You just need to sell it, just get rid of it. You're looking at something and wishing for something that you know is not going to happen.
The wedding day may have gone up in smoke, but Natalie wants what she sees as the kudos of being a married woman.
Despite the weddings not going ahead, in September 2007, Natalie changes her name by default to Hemming.
She used his name because of the children. It's as simple as that.
That was about part of his control. So whilst Natalie had his surname, that was him allowing her to have his surname.
Natalie strives to create her perfect family, but the controlling behaviour escalates.
He never allowed her to be on the mortgage, even though she was contributing all of those household bills because she always worked. It was all of those kinds of things that he always just kept it just at arm's length.
She'd definitely just be cautious of, what she did, what she said. She'd always try and, make sure I was behaving, because if I misbehaved, that also made him quite angry. He'd shout, he'd send me to bed early, he'd hit me. It was just, he became a very nasty person really quickly. Like, he'd just switch, instantly.
By 2010, Natalie is pregnant. Paul is hardly a doting stepfather. Kirsty seeks help.
At the end of November 2010, one of the children tell their teacher at school that Paul had dragged Natalie up the stairs.
I tried to tell my head of the year what was going on, and not much was done about it.
It's incredibly rare, actually, for children to disclose that kind of violence and abuse. So it raises questions about how common is this? Is that the first time that child's ever seen anything, or is it the 20th time?
Natalie is not alone in suffering Hemming's obsessive need to control everything.
He'd send me to bed without dinner and things. He'd make me stand in the naughty corner. Overnight, on a school night, was the longest time I spent there. I can't even remember what I did. He'd stay awake all night just to make sure I stood there. I could hardly stay awake at school. It was awful.
At age 11, Kirsty begins to question her turbulent home life.
I just started to think, do you know what? None of my friends at school have said any of these things happened to them. I brought it up with a friend and she'd said to me, that's not normal.
She hides these feelings from her mum.
I never remember speaking to her about it, properly, because I just thought, what if he finds out that I've said something, or what if he's listening, or I was just terrified of saying anything.
The couple have been together for 5 years. Natalie has had enough.
At the beginning of 2012, having lost her own property that she was evicted from several years prior, Natalie puts an application into the council for housing stating that she's trying to escape Paul because he's violent.
New accommodation can't be found, and during this time, Natalie and the children remain at Hemming's house. But things are getting worse.
On the 17th of May 2013, Natalie's eldest daughter goes to a neighbour and tells the neighbour Daddy's hitting Mummy.
He got violent with her while she was either holding my sister or brother, so she freaked out we were all there, and I think she knew there wasn't much she could do to protect us in case things got out of hand.
It does change the dynamic because she feels responsible for the impact on the children.
I think I waited outside for about an hour, and I could still hear all the shouting and stuff going on inside. And then she came back, the next door neighbour, and she rang the police.
She went back to my mum's and the police had taken her there. And that, I think, was the point at which I started to ask more questions.
Natalie doesn't always provide the answers.
I don't think she ever said he was hitting her and being violent, but she definitely knew there were problems. And she'd always say to her, like, don't go back, it's not worth it, you know, all these promises he's making, they're not true.
Her family had sussed him out and was actually trying to keep an eye on her and trying to encourage her to leave.
With their encouragement, Natalie takes the children and moves to Yorkshire.
I remember the time when she left him and we came up here, and we lived in Joanne's old house.
I just said, look, let's just get her up here, get her away from it. She needs a fresh start. I think she was really tired.
We lived up here for just over a year. I went to a new primary school. My brother and sister, they went to their preschools and nurseries.
The children are settling into their new home, but Joanne notices worrying behaviour in Kirsty.
She was outside, she was playing with one of my girls, Morgan, and I was watching them doing cartwheels and stuff around on the grass, and I'm listening to this conversation. I'm just thinking, where has that come from? Because her answers, you know, when they were talking, they were really aggressive and short. I think that was a real kind of red flag for me.
The family are all glad that she's left Hemming.
She's there for 4 months. I think it's fair to say it was perceived that, you know, the relationship was over.
She was sort of making headway into moving forward, but then he followed.
On weekends, he started showing up. He was talking through the letterbox. My mum wouldn't let them in. She kept saying to him, like, go away or I'll bring the police. I was sat on the stairs, and I could see his eyes through the letterbox.
Undeterred, Hemming heads to Sister Joanne's house.
He turned up on the driveway and it was a bit of a shock to see him stood outside the door when I opened the door. He said, I want her back, I'll do anything it'll take. It was really random, really odd, very uncomfortable. Best thing for Natalie would have been for him to just stay away.
But Paul Hemming persists.
I remember the first time he came up, I was terrified. I was thinking, like, please don't let him in. And you could tell he was, like, angry, but he was trying to hide it so that she'd believe it. And at first my mum didn't fall for it, but eventually she gave in.
Natalie can't hide it from her sister.
I walked in the house and I just knew straight away he'd been up because I could smell the dog. And I just said, why has he been here? And she said, because he came to see the children. And I was like, fair enough, but if you start letting him in, you're on a slippery slope, so you need to be careful.
He'd make all these promises to my mum saying, oh, we'll do this, or we'll move house, we'll get a bigger house, you can get a better job, so you can have nicer things, you know. He'd make all these empty promises to her and then never fulfill it.
She didn't tell me, she just left. She didn't say anything. I literally went round to the house and the house was empty.
Natalie, living back with Paul Hemming, causes friction in the family.
We were paying 2 mortgages. That house should have actually been rented out, and it wasn't. We'd given it to Natalie to use, so we'd put ourselves in a financially crippling situation. Yeah, I was gutted. I was absolutely gutted. I said to her, if you're going to dance with the devil, Nat, you're going to get burned.
Natalie Hemming is living with an abusive partner. Paul Hemming uses every opportunity to undermine her confidence.
I think he totally weaponised the children and said, if you leave me, I'll take the children off you, which was just her ultimate fear.
As a young kid, you get frustrated. You just think, oh, why can't you just leave? Why can't we just go? We don't have to stay here.
She didn't have a choice. She didn't have a choice. She was living in this man's house. He isolated her financially because he took the money. What other choice did she have?
People get really confused about why somebody would stay in an environment that was so violent, so abusive, especially because Natalie had actually reported it several times to the police. People sort of had an idea of what was going on. But there are so many reasons why women can't leave, and in Natalie's case, it seems to me like accommodation was one of those.
And the accommodation is about to change again.
They were moving to this new house, and it all seemed okay again.
I think it's because my mum got a new job at the Mercedes-Benz garage.
Now, this job is not without difficulties because Paul doesn't want her to take the job. In fact, he actually offers her money to not take the job and instead to take money from him each month so that she can stay at home and not work.
An offer that Natalie turns down.
After she started the job, she seemed like a bit more independent and more bubbly. I think she was starting to make like better friends where she worked.
It gives her financial independence, it gives her social independence that she hasn't had for a long time. It does mean, though, that from his point of view, he's lost some control.
He's about to lose a lot more.
We stopped in at the house, and I just remember him sitting in the corner on his phone, and he had this really surly look on his face that you could just cut the atmosphere with a knife.
Joanne later finds out why.
That was the beginning of the end. They were finished, they were done, they were sleeping in separate rooms.
Interestingly, Paul, around that time, has a conversation with Natalie's mum, also says the relationship is over and that they are going to be selling the house and splitting it.
I think she had realised that actually the life she was living was not a good life. And when she said she was leaving, I genuinely thought she's going to do it this time because she's doing it not because there's been something happen, she's doing it because she's wanting to do it.
Things are moving, things are changing, but she's still living in the same house as Paul. Now, this is a really dangerous place to be for a woman who's being abused.
Natalie has met somebody new.
She wouldn't admit it, but I had to say to her, don't jump out of the frying pan and into the fire on this one, make sure you know what you're doing. And she just smiled at me, but yeah, I knew.
It would have been a real change for Natalie for somebody to approach her, that she has value, she has worth, she's interested in, someone else is interested in her.
She was totally different. She was laughing and joking, and she had that spark back again.
But even though for her that relationship is completely over, they've separated, that doesn't mean that Paul was ready to let go of his control.
I think my mum and this guy from work started going on dates and things, and he found out, and he was not happy.
It was likely that he knew about that because he was checking her phone the whole time.
Natalie has no idea that she's under surveillance when she makes plans with the new man in her life. Natalie and one work colleague in particular have just checked into a hotel.
Natalie had arranged to go out with work colleagues and that my mum was looking after the children. I think the original plan had been for all the children to stay with my mum, but the youngest didn't settle, so my mum had to call and he had to come and pick up the youngest.
Paul went over and he saw Natalie's car. They have a conversation about where Natalie may be.
My mum only knew as much as we did, and that was that she was going out with work colleagues.
And so he becomes angry, he's thinking about where is she, why isn't she here with the kids?
Natalie and her date are seen on CCTV checking out the following morning. She then heads to her mum's to collect the children.
She'd been quite honest with my mum about the fact that she'd met this guy and that they'd gone out and they'd had dinner. So my mum knew everything at that stage. She'd said to my mum, "That's it. I need to move out quicker because I don't feel comfortable with this." My mum had said to her, "Don't say anything to him about that you've met somebody else because it will not help the situation."
In the afternoon, Natalie and the children return from her mum's back to the house that she's sharing with Paul, and he must have been stewing on that, waiting for her to get home.
I remember the night they just had a big argument, and it was bedtime, and he was saying to her, come downstairs, say goodnight to Mum. I went down and she was sat on the couch, and she had like a blanket around. I could tell she'd been like crying, because like her eyes were puffy and she was sniffing and stuff. But I said goodnight.
I think she went home and she told him that she was moving out as quickly as possible and that she had met somebody else.
Went to bed, everything was normal. I didn't hear them shouting again.
I was sat in the school car park waiting to do the school pickup, and because that was a quiet time for me, my mum used to ring me, so it was a regular thing, and she said, I can't get hold of Natalie. And I just remember saying to her, don't be daft, Mum, she'll be working. She'll ring you as soon as she's finished. And she said, no, you don't understand. I haven't been able to get hold of her since Sunday.
Thames Valley Police, Suzanne speaking, how can I help? Yes, madam. My daughter's been missing for 48 hours. We have just been absolutely looking for a partner, and he says he doesn't know where she is. It's worrying me because it's not like her. So, what's the specific concern that's caused you to call the police?
What's telling in this case is the initial call from Margaret Hammond, Natalie's mother. When she's asked why she's concerned, she says him. So she was significantly concerned about what he was capable of.
Investigators begin their search at Natalie's home.
He was really taken aback by the fact that she'd been reported missing and the police had turned up on the door looking for her. He wasn't expecting it.
This is a mother of 3 children who, according to him, must have left all the children, left their children with him. Doesn't leave any trace whatsoever. So that in itself is alarming.
Emily's demeanour is also a cause for concern.
The officers then attended the house, and whilst there they became concerned. Paul has been evasive in his answers to the officers.
He's also evasive on the phone to Natalie's older sister, Kerry.
He told Kerry that she had gone to her friend Becky's. But what he didn't realise is that we were friends with Becky and we had her number, so we'd already made that call and obviously could shut that down straight away.
He didn't want to allow the officers the opportunity to look at his phone.
Just hours into the missing person inquiry, police become more suspicious of Paul.
It was already clear at that point there was a history of domestic abuse. The duty superintendent and the duty senior investigating officer were consulted. During that night, they made the decision that Paul should be arrested on suspicion of murder.
The children are upstairs.
I woke up the next morning, and I got dressed for school before I came out of my room. And then I turned, so like the staircase was there and my room was there, so I had to like turn the corner to go down the stairs. And I turned the corner and there were 2 policewomen coming up the stairs. And I thought, that was weird. And they said to me, you're not going to school today, you can get changed to something else. I didn't listen to them. I just went downstairs because I was just like, where is everyone? And my brother and sister were sat in the living room, I think, with another police officer. I couldn't see anyone I knew, like, Mum wasn't there, he wasn't there. I was so confused. And then my gran and a family friend's son showed up, and my gran was crying. So obviously I knew something was wrong, but I just didn't know what.
Natalie Hemming has not been seen for 4 days. Investigators suspect that she's been murdered and they're desperately seeking information.
What is key in a missing person inquiry is proof of life inquiries. So things like mobile phone, bank usage for people. We all leave electronic footprints these days, and what was key in this case was Natalie had no footprint anywhere.
I think everybody knew. It was like nobody was saying it, but everybody knew, because everybody knew Natalie and knew how important the children were to her, and the fact that she just wouldn't have just left the children.
All I knew was that Mum was missing. They didn't tell me anything about Paul.
Paul Hemming has been arrested on suspicion of Natalie's murder. Whilst being questioned, he attempts to divert attention to a new suspect.
During the interviews, he says Natalie came back home on the Sunday afternoon, which we know is correct. And then during that evening, that Natalie had disclosed to him that she'd been raped by the work colleague.
But there's a text message sent from Natalie to her friend saying that she'd had a great night.
So it was put to him that those text messages to her best friend Becky were hardly the text messages of a woman who'd been raped. He didn't reply to those questions.
Investigators next turn their attention to Paul's whereabouts on the night that Natalie goes missing. He claims to have been in bed, but his car says otherwise.
The S-Max, as a call, which is Paul's car, that night had been out for around two hours. It activated ANPR. That was crucial now to me. I'm looking for more CCTV around where it's been activated. I'm thinking, where does he know? What areas does he know out there? Why has the car gone that route?
We know he's driven around. He left the 3 children at home alone while he's done this.
The then 12-year-old Kirsty is also interviewed by police.
I remember I was so nervous, and they'd ask me questions about like how he'd treat me, and I just wouldn't answer. I was terrified of, if nothing's happened to her and she's just gone away and she comes back and he finds out what I said, he could get really, really angry with me.
There was a rug that was removed from the property. That rug was a red rug.
The rug becomes a critical part of the investigation.
The red rug goes. There's fibres in the boot of his car. And we would say that rug was used to transport Natalie to her deposition site.
A theory Paul Hemming denies.
What you're saying is that I have killed my partner. I have disposed of her body. I have tidied the house, made it look pristine, managed to cook them dinner and many more things without them knowing.
That's exactly what we're saying, Paul.
Impossible.
Forensic swabs taken from inside the car and living room will later prove that Hemming is lying.
There was red fibres found in the rear of the S-Max. Blood found in the rear of the S-Max. There was airborne blood found on the coffee table. So given all that information, that was at the point I decided, actually this is murder inquiry and we will need to inform the family.
The children have been shielded from the widespread media coverage of Natalie's disappearance.
Joanne and Kerry sat me down and actually told me what was going on, and they told me in detail. That was when I kind of started having doubts in my mind, and obviously because I knew about his behaviour, I was putting 2 and 2 together.
It was hard because my mum blamed herself. She felt like she'd let her walk back into what happened, and she should have told her not to.
Paul Hemming has been in custody for 24 hours. Police must either charge or release him.
I made the decision that I felt this case had passed the threshold test and needed to go to the Crown Prosecution Service for a decision. I ran the risk, if they said no at that point, that we would have to release a murderer.
The Crown Prosecution Service agrees and charges 43-year-old Paul Hemming with murder. But without finding Natalie, it will be a challenge to prove their case.
A trial generally happens within 6 months of someone being remanded in custody. So actually, crucially, to find Natalie for her family, or actually to get justice for Natalie and her family, we really needed to find Natalie. And that time was ticking.
An outcome is an outcome. If you've got closure, you can process, you can, whatever that may be. I didn't want to be left in limbo. I needed that closure.
The search area to locate Natalie is vast.
The search was unprecedented. The geography was so significant. It was hundreds of square miles. So we utilised search specialists, not just from our force, but from neighbouring forces. We utilised dogs, helicopter, and, as you would expect, significant numbers of officers on the ground searching.
We had no idea about the extent of the search that was happening. We were really mindful not to watch the news, and we kept off social media.
Every day was different. Some days I'd be at the police station giving interviews. Some days the liaison officers would be at our house, just talking to us. Every day would just be different.
Then, after 3 weeks of intensive searching, police received a tip-off.
It was on I believe, Sunday morning. A man was cutting his lawn, and quite a rural area of Chandler's Cross. He saw what he thought was something strange. He went over, had a look, and clearly found the body of a woman.
DNA confirms that the body is Natalie Hemming. Joanne and her sister Kerry are informed.
We were out in the garden, and Kerry came in and she went, "Oh my God, I've got a missed call." And I picked my phone up at the same time, and I have as well. And I just remember we were stood in this room and looked at each other and went, "They found her." And we just knew that they found her.
Natalie hadn't been really well concealed. However, it was a rural area which wouldn't be used by many people that often.
It was just a relief to know, one way or another, the only control he had left was that he knew where she was and we didn't. And to actually take that away from him and to be able to give her the dignity of a proper burial and and her friends to be able to be at that funeral and things, that was so important. That was so important.
I wasn't surprised, but obviously it's still a bit like, oh my God, this is happening to us. It's a very weird feeling. You just got so many emotions all at once, but you don't know which one to feel.
So for a long time it was just about I've got to just keep putting one foot in front of the other. We just need to get to the end of this. So yeah, it was a long time before I think I properly processed what was happening and what had happened.
Natalie is finally laid to rest, surrounded by family and friends.
I remember there were a lot of people there. I remember getting out of the car and there were just loads and loads of people. And I just remember I was sat at the front and we were just crying our eyes out. And that was the first time I cried about it. I just didn't know how to process my emotions.
Paul Hemming appears at Luton Crown Court charged with the murder of 31-year-old Natalie.
He offered a plea to manslaughter and then maintained throughout his trial. He threw like a heavy ornament at Natalie, not intending to kill her. Then he panicked, put her in the boot of his car and disposed of her.
Simon Steele isn't convinced by Paul's story.
This, for me, was an absolute case of murder. We needed to find the evidence so the jury could come to the right verdict.
The pathologist's report provides crucial evidence to contradict Hemming's story.
Importantly, those examinations showed a fractured right temple, broken left ulna, and bruising to her right forearm, which are absolutely consistent with somebody defending themselves against blows to the head area. And clearly, the temple was a significant head injury.
Natalie's mum attends court every day of the 2-week trial at Luton Crown Court.
I didn't want my mum to hear it, but she went every day. They actually just, because my mum was quite deaf, when the pathologist was talking, they actually turned off my mum's closed loop so she couldn't hear what was actually being said, because I didn't want that to be my mum's sort of lasting image of Natalie. It was a really conscious decision that I would only do the one day because I wouldn't allow him to take anything else from me. And I've always said that's it. He's not taking anything else from this family. He's done all he's going to do. And we've stuck by that.
It's a difficult day for Natalie's family.
I can remember him at the end of that first hearing looking at me and saying, I didn't do it, I promise. You know, and just looking at him, just thinking, I just had to trust the process. I just had to trust that the courts would get this right.
On the 4th of November 2016, 43-year-old Paul Hemming is found guilty of the murder of Natalie Hemming.
He was also guilty of preventing a lawful burial, and he was sentenced to 20 years imprisonment.
I don't think he'll ever tell the truth about what happened that night, because it's the only thing he's got left that he can hold on to. And I think it's one of those things where you can allow that to eat you up, and you can allow that to be the outcome of this, or you can say, okay, you have that, you need that, I don't need that. I know you did this, that's all I need to know. And you have to draw a line in the sand, and you have to say, that's it. You're not taking anything else.
Natalie's family are left processing their devastating loss.
Once something like this happens, it changes everything. It changes everything. And I don't just mean in the practical sense. I mean, it changes the way you think.
You take it day by day. You know, some days I go some days and I don't think about it, which it sounds bad, but you know, it doesn't cross my mind. And then there are days when it's all I can think about. It's really strange.
In the weeks and months after her death, the family uncovers more of her story.
She was telling my mum one thing, she was telling Kerry something else. She wouldn't really talk to me about it. I think she told my brother Stephen certain things. But it's only after the fact, and you all sit round a table and you start to talk, and then this picture comes out and you start thinking, God, why didn't we see this? But she was protecting herself and protecting the children.
I think with domestic abuse, everyone should have a very open mind, because actually it can happen to anybody.
We felt incredibly guilty that we'd not been able to intervene and do more. And when they first moved up here, I said to Kirsty, why didn't you tell us? Why did you never say what was happening? And her answer was, if I had told you or Nanny, you wouldn't have let me go home, and then he would have hurt my mum. And it was such a kick in the stomach, because that child at 12 years old had carried that from being about 6. She knew if she said anything, he would hurt them. And if a child can understand that, why can't adults?
Natalie's children now live with Joanne. They try to focus on happier times, but the memories are painful for Kirsty.
I think I get upset is when I hear what the children went through. And as a mum, that's really hard to hear. That's really hard to hear. She will talk about some things, and she talks about her mum all the time. You know, we talk about her all the time. She's, you know, always in conversation. They know what's happened. They remember what's happened. So you can't distort reality for them. They've got to be able to process what's happened. And so obviously we try to focus on the good things and the happy memories,
when I think of her, I don't think of her as this poor woman that was just trapped in this like horrible situation. You know, I just remember her for like who she was. You know, like she used to love reading books and watching films like I did. She loved shopping. I remember her for all like those things, not like the sad person that she was, obviously trapped in that life. You know, I don't think of it that way.